The first time I saw my sons as beasts, I did not scream. In the dream, the lanterns were lit, the ancestral tablets were arranged in perfect order. The air smelled of sandalwood and ink. Lu Mingyuan, my oldest, stood before me in his court robe, tall, composed, hands folded within his sleeves. Beside him stood my youngest son, Lu Mingwen, slightly behind, as he always did. His gaze was steady, loyal. They were speaking. I do not remember the words, but I remember the feeling that they were explaining something, defending something, asking me to understand. I felt proud. I felt relieved. I felt that whatever storm had troubled my sleep these past months had been nothing more than fatigue. Then something shifted. A sound. Not loud. A tearing sound. Like silk slowly pulled apart. Ming Yuan's shadow lengthened behind him, not downward, upward. It rose against the wall, broad shoulders widening, head stretching, ears sharpening. Mingwen's shadow followed. The light flickered once, and the shadows grew fur. I watched as their human silhouettes dissolved into the shape of two tigers, massive, silent, breathing. Their jaws opened. Blood poured from their mouths, though neither had moved. Behind them, the ancestral tablets began to crack. One by one, I tried to step forward. My feet would not obey. I tried to call their names. Ming Yuan, Mingwen. No sound left my throat. It was not that I had no voice. It was that something in me already knew. The tigers turned toward me. Their eyes were not wild. They were lucid. They were my son's eyes. And then they leapt. I woke with my hands clawing at my own bedding. The room was dark. My night robe was soaked through. Outside, the watchman's wooden clapper sounded the third watch. I did not sleep again that night. At breakfast, Mingyuan was discussing river tax reform. The southern granaries are mismanaged, he said evenly. If we restructure the transport routes, we could prevent shortages during flood season. His tone was calm, rational, controlled, as if the world were something that could still be corrected with diagrams and memoranda. Mingwen nodded. And remove 2 redundant supervisors. They skim the supply chain. He said it lightly, almost casually, but there was steel beneath it. They both looked at me, waiting for my opinion, waiting as they had since they were boys bringing me their school essays. Sunlight fell across their faces. Their hands were steady. Their tea did not tremble. I studied their fingers. The same fingers that once gripped my robe when thunder frightened them. The same fingers that now turned policy into strategy. I searched their eyes for something. I did not know what. A flicker, a hesitation, a trace of the dream. There was nothing. Only intelligence. Only conviction. I forced myself to eat. The rice felt dry in my mouth. It was only a dream, I said aloud. Neither of them had asked. Ming Yuan paused briefly, as if considering whether I meant the policy discussion or something else. Mingwen smiled faintly, puzzled but respectful enough not to question me. and I realized then that I had spoken not to them, but to myself. Flood relief. The Emperor's seal on the dispatch was still wet when the messenger arrived. I was in the outer hall when Ming Yuan accepted it. He read quickly once, then folded the paper with care, as if careful hands could keep a careless world from breaking. Mingwen leaned in. "Jiangnan?" he asked. Mingyuan nodded. 3 prefectures, he said. Collapsed dikes. Relief grain delayed. Reports of banditry. Mingwen's mouth tightened. Bandits, he repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it false. There was anger there. Not reckless anger. The kind that builds quietly when injustice repeats too often. The messenger cleared his throat. The court requests haste. The people are suffering. Ming Yuan looked up. His expression stayed polite. People are always suffering, he said. The question is whether the court notices in time. It was not disrespect. It was fatigue. Fatigue disguised as clarity. I should have stopped him. I should have said something about careful words, careful enemies, careful lives. I should have reminded him that reform and survival rarely walk the same road. Instead, I heard myself ask, "When do you leave?" "Before dawn," he answered. Mingwen didn't even look at me. He was already counting what they would need, already walking the route in his mind. Outside the hall, the wind picked up and died again, like a creature deciding whether to show itself. They left while the sky was still bruised with night. Servants carried saddlebags. A clerk from the Board of Works brought rolled maps and sealed ledger books. Ming Yuan checked the seals himself. Mingwen checked the knots. They moved with the smooth coordination of brothers who had shared a childhood room, shared tutors, shared one lamp in winter. My wife stood behind me under the eaves, hands tucked into her sleeves. She said nothing, but I felt the restraint in her stillness, like a bow drawn and held without release. When Ming Yuan bowed to her, she reached out and straightened his collar, too carefully, as if he were still 12. "Don't argue in front of lions," she said quietly. Ming Yuan's eyes softened. "We're going to see the commoners, Mother. Lions don't travel south." He believed danger wore a crown. She did not smile. When Mingwen bowed, she only touched his sleeve once and withdrew her hand fast, as if afraid that if she held on, she would not let go. I watched them ride out, 2 young men in clean robes, believing clean intentions could keep them clean. I didn't know then how quickly the South would change them. The first report arrived 4 days later, carried by a courier whose horse foamed at the mouth. The official letter was short, proper, measured. But Ming Yuan added a separate note, written in his own hand, ink pressed deep as if the brush had stabbed the paper. "Father, the water did not only take homes, it took names. I did not know a person could look at you and still not look like a person. Ming Yuan." The phrasing was careful, controlled. But the pressure of the ink betrayed him. He had seen something that refused to fit inside language. I read that line twice. Then I folded the note and placed it in my sleeve as if it were a blade. What they saw in the first prefecture was not flood the way court officials spoke of it. It was not a line on a map. It was a smell. mud and rot. Wet straw, human waste mixed with river silt. It was a weight in the air that pressed against the lungs. It was the sound of coughing everywhere, like the land itself was sick and could not expel what choked it. The barrier had broken 2 li outside the city, a gap wide enough to swallow a cart. Water had carved the earth into a mouth. Villagers stood along the high ground, staring down at what used to be their fields. Not crying, not shouting, just staring, the kind of staring that happens when grief is too large for sound. Mingwen's boots sank into mud at the first step. He lifted his foot and stared at the thick brown paste clinging to the sole. It looked like earth. It did not feel like earth. A child ran past him, barefoot, shivering, carrying a broken bowl as if it were treasure. Mingwen turned, instinctively reaching into his sleeve. He had no coin on him, not loose, not quick. He called to a local clerk. "Where is the relief station?" The clerk gestured vaguely. "North Gate," Ming Yuan asked. "Why is the station not here? Why are they walking to the North Gate?" The clerk's smile was thin. "Because that's where the grain is." Ming Yuan followed the direction with his eyes. From the high ground, he could see the North Gate. And he could see the line, a line of bodies, not standing, crouching, lying down, moving only when someone behind them shoved. A woman in the line held a baby against her chest. The baby's face was grey. Its mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish. Ming Yuan's jaw tightened. He did not blink. He did not look away. Mingwen whispered, "That baby's not breathing." His voice was not steady. "Don't whisper," Ming Yuan said. "Go." They walked toward the gate. The closer they came, the louder the line became. Thin, fraying voices, scraping against authority, not conversation, pleading. "Please, just one scoop. My husband is buried in the mud. I have 3 children. We haven't eaten in 2 days." Each sentence was short, because hunger shortens language. A guard at the grain station stood with a stick, not for bandits, for peasants. He struck the ground between feet like he was herding animals. "Back, back, 1 per household." A man in the line lifted his hands. "We are 1 household. My wife is sick." The guard struck him across the shoulder. The man folded as if he had no bones. Something inside Mingwen snapped. It was not rage, not yet. It was disbelief, the kind that comes when injustice is not subtle, when it is ordinary. Mingwen moved before Ming Yuan could. "Stop," Mingwen said. His voice cut through the noise like something finally refusing to bend. The guard turned, annoyed, then saw their robes, their seals, and stiffened. Power recognized power. Ming Yuan stepped forward, voice even. "Who is in charge here?" The minor official emerged from behind the grain sacks, face oily with forced hospitality. "My lords," he said, bowing too deeply, "we have been managing as best as we can. Ming Yuan pointed at the line. "Is this your best?" His tone did not rise, but something inside it had hardened. The official's smile tightened. The people are unruly when hungry. Mingwen's hands curled inside his sleeves. He felt heat rising behind his ribs. Heat without outlet. Ming Yuan's voice stayed calm, and that calmness was colder than anger. "Open the sacks," he said. The official hesitated. For a heartbeat, the wind moved dust across the yard. Ming Yuan repeated softly, "Open them." Softly. The softness was not mercy. It was warning. They opened the first sack. The grain inside was damp. The second sack. The grain was mixed with sand. Mingwen's breath hitched. He stepped forward before he meant to. The third sack. Half the grain had been replaced with husks and chaff. A woman in the line saw it and made a sound between laughter and sobbing. "Sand," she croaked. "They feed us sand." The minor official's face blanched. That sound lodged somewhere deep. Ming Yuan turned his head slowly, eyes settling on the man like a weight. "You signed the receipt for this?" he asked. The official licked his lips. "My lord, the transport." "Who told you," Ming Yuan asked, "that starving people could be cheated twice?" The official had no answer because there was no excuse that did not reveal rot. The guard shifted uneasily. Mingwen took one step closer. "Where is the real grain?" he asked. The question was no longer administrative. It was personal. The minor official's eyes darted toward the inner courtyard. Ming Yuan followed that glance. Something changed then, not in posture, not in expression, but in threshold. He said nothing. He simply walked, and for the first time since leaving the capital, he did not look like a son. He looked like a man who had begun to lose patience with the shape of the world. In the inner courtyard of the relief station, behind a locked shed, they found the sacks, clean, dry, full, stamped with the court seal. Mingwen stepped closer first. He touched the seal with 2 fingers, not roughly, not in anger, almost gently, as if he were checking whether it would smear. It did not. The red ink was perfect. The Empire's authority pressed into grain that had never reached the starving. He stared at it too long, as if waiting for the seal to deny itself. Ming Yuan's voice was quiet. "How many died while you locked this behind wood?" The minor official fell to his knees so quickly his forehead struck stone. "My lord, please, this is how it's done. Everyone." Mingwen's face flushed, not with heat, but with humiliation. "Everyone," he repeated. The official's words tumbled over each other. "The prefecture demands a share if I do not. My family, my children." Mingwen almost laughed. The sound rose in his throat, but died before it formed. "Your children. And what are these?" Ming Yuan lifted a hand, not to strike, not even sharply, to silence. His hand did not tremble, but something in his gaze had shifted. "Bring a ledger," he said. His voice had flattened. Mingwen turned to the clerk from the Board of Works. "Bring our books. Now." The clerk ran. As the ledger was dragged out and slammed onto a low table, Mingyuan looked back toward the north gate. The line had not moved. People were still waiting, still crouched, still hoping, still being fed sand. His jaw flexed once. Only once. "Open the shed," he said. The official's head jerked up. "My lord, you cannot." Mingyuan did not raise his voice. "Open it." The second time, the words carried no argument in them, only inevitability. The shed door swung outward. The smell of grain poured out, rich and cruel. It smelled like survival. It smelled like life. It smelled like theft. A woman at the gate saw it. Her scream tore through the yard, not high, not hysterical, but raw. Then the entire line surged, not in rage, in desperation. Guards shouted, sticks rose. Mingwen stepped forward. "No one strikes them," he said. His voice was not loud, but something in it cut. The guards froze, not because of rank, because they felt the shift. Mingyuan walked forward into the edge of the chaos. He did not shout. He did not command. "Line up again," he called. "One per household. But you will receive grain, real grain, today." A man in the crowd shouted, "You lie." Mingyuan did not flinch. "Then watch." Mingwen climbed onto the step. His hands shook as he lifted the first scoop. He hated that they shook. He poured it into a bowl. The grain fell clean, solid, whole. The sound it made against pottery echoed, soft, obscene. Proof. A woman in the line began to sob. Someone behind her began to laugh. Thin, cracked laughter that bordered on madness. The crowd moved again, but slower, more careful, like people relearning how to believe. Mingyuan watched them, and something in his chest tightened. Not pride, not relief, a question. If this was so easy, why had it not been done? That night, Mingyuan and Mingwen sat in the temporary office with the ledger open. The lamp smoked, the air was thick. Outside, the city stank of wet death. Mingwen scrubbed his hands at the basin, again and again. The water turned brown, then clear. He kept scrubbing. "You can't wash it off," Mingyuan said quietly. Mingwen's voice cracked. "Sand, brother, sand." The word broke. He pressed his palms against the rim of the basin. "I watched a woman thank us for feeding her dirt." Mingyuan turned the ledger page. Numbers, names, stamps, red ink, clean ink, false ink. "Look," Mingyuan said, tapping a line. "The receipt is real. The seal is real. The transport record is real." Mingwen leaned closer. "But the grain isn't." Mingyuan nodded. Silence stretched. The only sound was the lamp sputtering. Then Mingyuan said, almost to himself, "The court will not believe us." Mingwen looked up sharply. Why wouldn't they? We have proof. Ming Yuan met his eyes, not angry, not cynical, certain. Because believing us means admitting the rot reaches upward, Ming Yuan said. And upward is where men keep their own hands clean. Mingwen felt something sink in his stomach. He had always believed corruption was local, manageable, a weed. Now it felt like a root system, deep, intertwined. What do we do? Mingwen asked. Ming Yuan did not answer at once. He stared at the ledger. His reflection in the oil sheen of the page looked older, more tired, more dangerous. We finish this prefecture, he said finally, and then we see how high it goes. He did not say what happens if it goes all the way. He did not say what happens when justice cannot be administered through procedure, but the thought had entered the room. It did not leave. In the second prefecture, they found the barrier intact. The fields still flooded. Not because the river broke through, because someone had refused to open the sluice. They met the local magistrate, a man with a neat beard and immaculate sleeves. He bowed, smiled, offered tea. Flood management is complex, the magistrate said smoothly. We must consider long-term stability. Ming Yuan's voice remained polite. Your farmers are sleeping in trees. The magistrate's smile did not change. The commoners are resilient. Mingwen's chair scraped the floor. Resilient, he repeated. I stepped over a dead old man outside your gate. The magistrate sighed, as if inconvenienced. My lord, famine and flood are natural calamities. Ming Yuan leaned forward slightly. The sluice gate record, he said softly, shows it has not been opened in 10 days. The magistrate spread his hands. There were concerns. If we release water here, downstream prefectures may accuse us of harming them. Mingwen laughed once. It was not amused. So, you harm your own people first? The magistrate's gaze flicked to Mingwen, sharp, cold, then smoothed. Your Excellency's concern for the people is admirable. However, this prefecture must also consider downstream impact. I fear acting too hastily may bring greater harm. Mingwen felt heat rise behind his ribs again, but this time it was different. Not disbelief, recognition. This was not incompetence, it was calculation. Ming Yuan placed his fingers lightly over Mingwen's wrist. A warning, a restraint. He smiled, small, polite. Of course, Ming Yuan said. Compromise. He turned to the clerk. Bring me the downstream correspondence. The magistrate's smile tightened for the first time. Now, Ming Yuan added, and this time the word carried steel. The correspondence arrived, neat stacks, sealed, documented. Mingwen turned the pages too fast. His breath shortened with each seal. They knew, he said. He wasn't angry. He sounded betrayed. Ming Yuan took the last document and read it slowly. Too slowly. At the bottom was the phrase, all actions taken in accordance with regional coordination directives. He stared at the words. Regional coordination. which meant approval. His fingers tightened on the page until the paper bent. He did not realize he was doing it. Mingwen leaned forward. "We will send this to the capital." His voice held desperation, not confidence. Mingyuan closed the ledger. The sound of it shutting was heavier than it should have been. "Yes," he said, but the word felt thin in his mouth. "If we report him, the emperor will rage for a day. The court will debate for a month, and the people will still be hungry next winter." Mingwen's eyes were bright and furious. "So what do we do?" Mingyuan did not answer. He stood. He walked to the window. Outside, a woman was kneeling in the mud, trying to dig out a cooking pot from what used to be her kitchen. Her hands were bleeding. She kept digging anyway. Mingyuan stared for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I understand now why men become bandits." Mingwen's breath hitched. He whispered, "Brother." For the first time since they had left home, he saw something unfamiliar in his brother's eyes. Not anger, not certainty, a kind of grief. "What are you saying?" Mingwen asked. Mingyuan did not answer, because what he was thinking was that righteousness might be too slow, and that thought frightened him more than the corruption. They reached the small shrine on the river road the next night. Not because they planned it, because the rain forced it. The sky opened like a wound, the road turned into a river, their horses slid, their escort cursed. A local guide pointed ahead with a wet sleeve. "There," he said, "old shrine, not much, but roof still stands." The shrine was small. No plaque, no incense smoke. The statue inside had no clear face, worn smooth as if the world had rubbed away its identity. Mingwen hesitated at the threshold. "Brother," he said quietly, "this place feels wrong." Mingyuan shook water from his sleeves. "Everything feels wrong," he replied. His voice was calm, too calm. Like a man who had spent the entire day holding something inside his chest and was afraid it would spill if he spoke too loudly. They entered. Their attendants stayed outside, muttering prayers. Mingyuan stood before the altar. He did not bow. He simply stared at the faceless statue. Mingwen lit a lamp. The flame wavered as if it did not want to be there. Mingyuan spoke first, still facing the altar. "If you live here," he said, "then you have watched the river swallow villages." Silence. Rain struck the roof. Water dripped down the beams. Mingwen shifted uneasily. Then the voice came, not loud, not monstrous, near. "You speak as if you care." Mingwen jerked around so fast his sleeve knocked over the lamp. The flame wavered wildly before catching itself. "Who's there?" Mingwen demanded. There was no figure in the doorway, no shadow at the beam, only the worn statue. Mingyuan felt something move down his spine. Cold. Deliberate. He did not step back. "Show yourself," Mingwen said, voice tight. "I am already here," the voice replied. The air felt heavier, like the shrine had drawn a breath. Mingyuan asked, "Who are you?" A listener, the voice said. A witness, Mingwen whispered. Brother. Ming Yuan's jaw tightened. If you witness suffering, Ming Yuan said, then you witness corruption. I do, the voice replied. Then you know, Ming Yuan said, that paper reaches the throne more slowly than hunger reaches the villages. The voice sounded almost amused. Memorials are paper, it said. Paper burns. Ming Yuan's hands curled. Then what do you offer? He asked. The voice waited, as if tasting his desperation. Then it said, I offer teeth. Ming Yuan did not feel fear first. He felt relief. The realization horrified him. Mingwen took a step back. No. Ming Yuan did not look at him. He said slowly, Teeth, to bite whom? The voice answered at once. Those who eat the people. Mingwen's throat tightened. That's not how it works, he forced out. We arrest, we report, we... The voice cut in, still calm. And how many have you reported today? Mingwen went silent. Outside, thunder rolled. The lamp flame bent sideways. Ming Yuan's voice turned careful. If you offer power, he said, you demand a price. Of course. What price? Then the voice said gently, not your life at first. Mingwen's skin prickled. Ming Yuan did not blink. Explain, Ming Yuan said. The voice spoke like someone reciting terms from a document. Clear, precise, merciless. Terms, it said. No commoners, no innocents. Only those who have already fed on others. Ming Yuan's voice was tight. Define. The voice almost smiled. Men who hoard relief grain. Men who sell water gates. Men who trade lives for silver. Ming Yuan said, agreed. Mingwen's head snapped toward him. Brother. Ming Yuan lifted a hand, quietly ordering him to stop. The voice continued, unhurried. Each time you use the teeth, the hunger grows. Ming Yuan's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Meaning you will begin to crave, the voice said. Not gold, not women, not wine. Craving is beneath you. Mingwen swallowed hard. Ming Yuan said, crave what? The voice breathed the answer into the space between them. Justice. The word struck him harder than threat would have. Justice. He had spoken that word in court halls. He had written it in formal script. He had believed it meant order. Now it sounded like hunger. Ming Yuan's fingers tightened. Mingwen shook his head slowly. Brother, no. No. Ming Yuan spoke over him. What else? The voice obliged. Your body will become my vessel when you call on me. Ming Yuan's expression did not change, but his voice did. Vessel, he repeated. So I lose control. At first, the voice said, you will ride the beast. Mingwen's breath trembled, and later Ming Yuan asked. The voice softened, almost kind. Later, you will sit inside it and watch. Ming Yuan imagined it for a heartbeat, seeing through eyes that were not his own, hearing screams and being unable to stop his own hands. The image flashed. He did not look away. Silence slammed down. Even the rain sounded far away. Mingwen's voice cracked. "That's possession," the voice responded calmly. "That's consequence." Ming Yuan's jaw worked. He looked at the statue, faceless and patient. "You're a demon," Mingwen whispered. The voice did not deny it. "I am what the world grows when righteousness is starved." Ming Yuan's eyes flicked toward Mingwen. Mingwen's face was pale, eyes wet with fury and fear. "Brother," Mingwen said, almost pleading now, "we can still—" Ming Yuan cut him off softly. "With what?" he asked. "Paper?" Mingwen flinched. Ming Yuan turned back to the altar. His voice dropped. "If I accept," he said, "what prevents you from turning your teeth on innocence?" The voice answered immediately, as if it had expected the question. "Write it," it said. Ming Yuan's eyes narrowed. "Write the contract," the voice repeated. "With blood, if you want weight. Speak it aloud. Bind me with your terms." Mingwen stared. "Bind it?" The voice was patient. "You think only demons bind humans," it said. "Humans bind demons too. That is why you fear shrines. You built cages before you built laws." Ming Yuan's breath was steady, but his hand shook slightly as he drew a small knife from his sleeve. Mingwen lunged forward. "No!" Ming Yuan's gaze snapped to him. One look. Not anger. Command. Mingwen froze. Ming Yuan cut his palm. Blood welled. Dark. Warm. For a strange moment, the scent of it grounded him. He thought of the farmers, of the woman digging sand from grain, of the old man's body in the water. If blood was required, he would start with his own. He pressed his hand to the altar stone. The stone drank the blood like thirsty earth. Ming Yuan spoke, slowly, clearly, clause by clause. "By this contract," Ming Yuan said, voice low, "I accept the teeth you offer, but you will obey these terms." Even the lamp flame steadied, as if listening. Ming Yuan continued. 1. No commoner will be harmed by my hand or by the vessel you take. 2. No child will be fed upon. No woman will be touched. No starving man driven to theft will be counted as prey. Mingwen's eyes widened. He had not expected Ming Yuan to add that. Ming Yuan's voice hardened. 3. If you violate this, you will be bound to this shrine again, sealed, starved, forgotten. The voice went quiet for a long moment. Then it said softly, "Clever." Ming Yuan did not pause. 4. You may take my body only when I call. You will not seize it in daylight without my consent. Mingwen inhaled sharply. The voice said, "Agreed." Ming Yuan's throat moved. "And 5," he said, voice almost breaking for the first time. "When this ends, when the work is done, you release my younger brother." Mingwen stared at him. Only then did he understand. This had never been about power. Ming Yuan did not look at him. He stared at the altar. The voice was silent. So silent that Mingwen began to shake. Then the voice answered. "I will take the one who called me," it said, "not the one who followed." Ming Yuan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were bright with something that was not relief. It was commitment. He said hoarsely, "Then accept." The lamp flame flared once. Ming Yuan flinched. Just once. As if something inside him had already recoiled. Then he steadied. Because he had already chosen. The shrine seemed to inhale. Behind Ming Yuan's shadow, just for a blink, something striped moved. Mingwen whispered, "Brother." Ming Yuan did not answer. Outside, the rain kept falling, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the shrine, the river moved on, indifferent, carrying silt, bodies, and the last patience of men who had believed in law. When they left the shrine, something in the air had changed. Mingwen did not speak on the road. Ming Yuan rode straight-backed, face unreadable. But when the wind shifted behind him, Mingwen saw it first. A shadow, too broad. It moved half a breath out of sync with him, not trailing, following, and his brother did not notice, or pretended not to. Mingwen looked away quickly. If he acknowledged it, it would become real. He wanted to believe the contract was words, but the wind smelled different. 3 nights later, another official died. I was drinking tea in the courtyard when the front gate burst open. The cup trembled in its saucer. A servant stumbled in, breathless, mud on his hem. "Master." He bowed too quickly, too low. "What is it?" I asked. He swallowed. Assistant Minister Zhao was found dead in West Alley. Ming Yuan set down his cup. He did not spill a drop. "How?" he asked. The servant hesitated. "The body was torn." Mingwen frowned. "Torn. They say—" The servant lowered his voice. "It looked as if wild animals had attacked him." "In the capital?" Ming Yuan said quietly. The servant nodded. No one moved. The courtyard wind lifted the edge of Ming Yuan's sleeve. For a heartbeat, I thought the fabric beneath it shifted wrong. Not shadow, not light. Something coiled. Then it was gone. Ming Yuan lifted his cup again. His hand did not shake. Mine did. The next morning the court was in uproar. The emperor demanded answers. Ming Yuan stood among the civil officials, composed as ever. "This is the second case in 3 weeks," he said clearly. "Both victims were involved in last month's memorial opposing grain reallocation." A senior councillor scoffed. "You suggest conspiracy?" "I suggest investigation," Ming Yuan replied. His voice did not rise. Mingwen stood behind him, silent, watchful. Another minister snapped, Young men who speak too boldly often mistake coincidence for pattern. Ming Yuan did not lower his gaze. If coincidence repeatedly selects the same type of man, he said evenly, it ceases to be coincidence. The hall murmured. I watched from the side. Pride rose in my chest, and beneath it, fear. Because he sounded less like a son defending law, and more like a man already certain of guilt. That night I dreamed again. Not of my house, not of tigers, only the temple. Doors hanging crooked, wind moving through beams, and a voice, not monstrous, measured. Justice, it said. Justice requires strength. When I woke, my heart was not racing. It was heavy. Before dawn, I looked across the courtyard toward Ming Yuan's quarters. There, behind the thin paper of his window, an outline, broad, striped, still, watching. Gone when I blinked. 2 nights later, Councillor Han died. Not in an alley, in his carriage, within the city walls. The horses had not moved. The driver swore he heard nothing. At dawn, he opened the carriage door and screamed. The silk interior was shredded. Blood painted the lacquer panels. Han's throat had been crushed before his body was torn. There were claw marks on the ceiling, high, too high for a man. This time there was no talk of strays. The Emperor summoned the city guard commander. Bandits, he asked flatly. In the capital, the commander answered carefully. Then what? The Emperor demanded. The silence that followed was not confusion, it was dread. That evening, the household felt smaller, the air thick. My wife spoke of trivial matters, the harvest in the western estates, a neighbour's wedding. Ming Yuan's wife sat beside him, their daughter drowsing against her shoulder, her fingers gently smoothing the child's hair as she listened. Mingwen barely touched his food. Ming Yuan ate normally, too normally. He commented on the rice, discussed a tax reform draft, asked if the courier had arrived. He did not mention Zhao. He did not mention Han. Halfway through the meal, he paused, his head tilted slightly, as if listening. Not to us, to something farther away. I felt the change before I saw it. The air around him tightened, like heat above stone. Mingwen saw it too. Brother, he said softly. Ming Yuan blinked. Once. The tension vanished. He resumed eating. My wife looked between them. What is it? Nothing, Ming Yuan said. His voice was steady, but under the table his right hand gripped his left wrist so hard his knuckles blanched, as if holding something back. Or something in. The fourth death broke the illusion of coincidence. A warehouse supervisor, a man who had recently testified against Ming Yuan's reform proposal. He was found in the grain storage hall. Grain scattered everywhere, sacks ripped open, blood soaking into rice, white turning red, then brown. The guards who found him vomited. This time, someone swore they saw something leap from roof to roof. Striped, one guard muttered before being slapped for speaking nonsense. By now, the city was whispering. not about bandits, about curses, about spirits, about punishment. I received the news before dawn, the same servant, the same trembling bow. Master, another. My wife dropped her teacup. It shattered on stone. Ming Yuan did not react, not even a flicker. Mingwen's face had gone pale. I stood slowly. How many now? I asked. 4, the servant whispered. 4. The number did not echo in the courtyard. It echoed inside my ribs. I dismissed him. When the courtyard was empty, I spoke. Did either of you leave the house last night? Mingwen inhaled sharply, not loud, but enough. Ming Yuan looked at me. No. The word came too easily. Did you dream? I asked. My voice sounded calm. It was not. Mingwen's eyes widened, and in them I saw something close to confession. Ming Yuan did not blink. What kind of question is that? He asked calmly. The kind a father asks, I replied. Mingwen's hands trembled openly now. Ming Yuan said, We all dream. Do you remember yours? I pressed. He held my gaze. Do you remember yours? I pressed. For a moment, a flicker, something behind his eyes struggled. Then, very quietly, he said, No. It was the first lie he had ever told me, and what hurt more than the lie was this. He believed it. That afternoon, I visited the prison archives. Not openly. I had old colleagues, old favours. There are always men willing to speak softly if you speak first. I asked about the bodies, about the wounds, about claw spacing, about force. One guard muttered, If I didn't know better, I'd say it was a tiger. He said it the way a man confesses to seeing a ghost. Say it quietly, his superior hissed. There are no tigers in the capital. The guard looked at me. There was fear in his eyes, but also something worse. Recognition. There are no tigers in the capital, he repeated, the way a man repeats a lie until it feels safer than truth. The 5th death did not happen immediately. For several nights, nothing occurred. That silence was worse than the killings. Silence lets hope breathe. Silence lets a father lie to himself. Ming Yuan moved through the house, as always. He read memorial drafts. He debated policy with Mingwen. He attended court. He slept. But sometimes, while speaking, he would pause, mid-sentence, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Not distracted, responding. Mingwen stopped sleeping entirely. Dark circles hollowed beneath his eyes. He watched his brother the way a soldier watches a commander who has begun to speak to the sky. I began to sit in the courtyard at night, not as a minister, as a father who could no longer trust daylight. On the 7th night after the 4th death, I saw it. Ming Yuan rose from his bed without lighting a lamp. His steps were steady, too steady. Not hesitant like a man half awake. Not cautious like a man sneaking. He walked across the courtyard barefoot. The stones were cold. He did not flinch. Mingwen's door opened silently. Mingwen stepped out behind him. He did not look at me. His eyes were open but empty, not blank, vacant, like windows, with no one behind them. They passed through the side gate. I did not call out, because if I called out, and they did not answer, I would lose them before I lost them. I motioned to two old servants who had been with our family for decades. "Follow," I whispered. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. We kept distance. The city was quiet. A thin fog clung to the alleys. Mingyuan and Mingwen moved without speaking. When they reached an abandoned courtyard near the canal, they stopped. Mingyuan's shoulders stiffened. His spine arched slightly. I heard it before I saw it. Bone. Cracking. The sound was not loud. It was intimate, like joints dislocating under unseen hands. Mingwen staggered once, clutching his chest. For a heartbeat, he looked almost awake, almost aware. Then both of them bent forward, and their backs split outward. Cloth tore, skin stretched. I heard something wet, and in the space of 3 breaths, 2 tigers stood where my sons had been. Not illusions, not shadows. Massive, striped, breathing steam into the night air. Their eyes were still human. For a moment, just a moment, I saw terror in them, not fury, not hunger. Terror, as if they were knocking from inside their own skulls. Then something darker slid over them, like ink poured into water. The larger tiger lifted its head. It sniffed the wind, then it leapt. The smaller followed. The 2 servants behind me collapsed to their knees, trembling. One whispered, "Master, we must go." I could not move. The larger tiger had paused at the far wall. It turned its head. For one impossible heartbeat, our eyes met. I saw confusion in them, and something like shame. Then the tiger's gaze went blank, and it vanished over the wall. I did not follow further, because I already knew where it would go, and I was not strong enough to watch. Next morning, I went to see the Taoist. I did not wait for sunrise. I did not wait for reason. He lived on the western slope beyond the market district. An old man, clear eyes, hands steady. He poured tea before I spoke. "You have come late," he said. "I have come before they die," I replied quickly. My voice broke on the last word. He did not comment on it. He only studied my face. "Someone has made a pact." It was not a question. My jaw tightened. "You know this how?" "The air in the capital tastes wrong," he said. He sipped his tea calmly. I wanted to seize him by the collar, to demand urgency. Instead, I forced myself still. "Who signed?" he asked. I did not answer, because saying my son's name aloud would make it real. He studied my silence. "Blood was used," he said softly. The word felt like confession. He set down the cup. "Then it will not end quickly." "Can it be broken?" I asked. "Everything can be broken," he said. "Without killing them?" I asked. Now my voice was not steady. Now I sounded like what I was, a father bargaining with the sky. The Taoist looked at me for a long time, long enough that I understood his answer before he spoke. "That depends," he said, "on how far the tiger has already eaten." My throat tightened. What happens when the vessel loses control? He did not hesitate. The spirit begins to hunt without being called. And the host? He met my eyes. Watches. The word did not strike like thunder. It settled. Heavy. Final. Watches. I imagined my sons inside those striped bodies, seeing, knowing, unable to stop their own teeth. For the first time since the last death, my hands began to shake. That same night, in his chamber, Ming Yuan woke standing. Not in bed. Standing. In the courtyard. Barefoot. His palms were raw, his heart pounding. He looked down, his sleeves were dark, his stomach lurched. He tried to retrace the steps in his mind. Nothing. Only blankness. He heard breathing behind him, inside him. He pressed his hands over his ears. It did not stop. "I didn't call you," he whispered. The words felt weak even to him. From the doorway, Mingwen watched. And for the first time, he saw fear in Mingyuan's face. Not fear of being caught, fear of himself. Then Mingwen saw it, Mingyuan's shadow move. When Mingyuan did not. The sixth killing was different. It was louder. The victim was a revenue inspector who had recently seized land from flood refugees. He was attacked inside his home. But this time, guards were stationed outside. They heard the crash. They saw the wall splinter. And they saw the tigers. Not shadows, not rumors, tigers. Full-bodied, teeth bared. The larger one struck first, but when it reared back, for the smallest fraction of a breath, its claws stopped inches from the man's throat. Its body trembled as if two wills were fighting over the same bones. One guard swore later that the beast made a sound before the strike, not a roar, a choke. Then the claws came down. By then it did not matter. Arrows flew, spears thrust. One tiger roared and swiped a guard aside. The other stumbled. It twisted strangely, almost collapsing on its own limbs. For a moment, it looked as if the beast were trying to turn away, trying to fold in on itself, trying not to finish what it had begun. Then something inside it snapped. The roar changed. Lower. Hungrier. The Capitol Guard surrounded the home. Nets. Hooks. Fire. They drove the beasts into a corner. The larger tiger lunged once more. At open air. As if attacking something no one else could see. And this time, it was struck through the shoulder. It collapsed. The smaller one fell beside it. They thrashed. They howled. And the sound of it was not triumph, it was agony. The beast pen smelled of iron and wet stone. When I entered, the guards stepped aside reluctantly. The larger tiger lay chained at all four limbs. Heavy iron cuffs dug into its flesh. Blood matted the fur around its shoulder wound. The smaller tiger lay further back, sides rising unevenly. For a moment they did not react. They stared at the wall. Empty. Animal. And in that emptiness, I almost hoped. Almost. Then the larger one shifted. Slowly. Its head turned. Its eyes met mine. I had known those eyes since they were small enough to fit in my palm. I had held them when fever burned. I had watched them argue law before emperors. Now they stared at me from behind fangs. Recognition flickered. Not strong, but desperate. And then water gathered at the corners. A tiger does not weep like a man. The tears clung awkwardly to fur. One slid down anyway. Something inside me broke without sound. Mingyuan, I said. My voice did not belong to me. The tiger's ear twitched. The chains rattled as it tried to rise. Not like a beast preparing to strike. Like a son trying to kneel. Its body would not obey. The smaller tiger let out a low sound. Not a growl. Not a roar. A strangled, broken sound that scraped against the walls. I stepped closer. The guards stiffened. Do not, one warned. It knows me, I said, or perhaps I needed it too. The larger tiger pressed its head toward the bars. I raised my hand. My palm hovered in the air for a long, unbearable second. Then I touched its forehead. The fur was warm. Too warm. Burning. It closed its eyes. Its body shuddered under my hand. The tremor was not rage. It was restraint. My vision blurred for a moment. I blamed the dim light of the beast pen. My sons, said, and only then realized my voice had lost its steadiness. And for the first time in my life, I regretted what I had praised in them. I had taught them that justice was worth everything. I had not taught them that everything sometimes includes themselves. Sons, I said softly, I should have seen sooner. The tiger's breathing hitched. Its claws scraped the stone as if trying to carve letters into it. Then its body convulsed. The pupils widened. The warmth beneath my palm shifted. Drained. The animal gaze surged forward. Blank. Cold. The jaws snapped toward the bars. The guard yanked me back. The tiger slammed into the chains, roaring. The sound split the air, and inside that roar, layered beneath the fury, I heard it, laughter, patient, satisfied, not from my sons, from something using their lungs. My hands shook, not because I feared being bitten, because I understood at last. They were still inside, watching, and they could not close their own eyes. I went to the palace that evening. I did not request audience as a father. I requested audience as a former Grand Secretary. The court chamber was nearly empty when I was admitted. Lamps burned low. The emperor had dismissed most attendants. When I knelt before him, I did not raise my head. Your Majesty, I said, and heard the dryness in my own throat. The beasts captured are not beasts. The hall stilled. The Emperor's voice was cool. Explain. They are my sons. The words did not echo. They simply landed. Somewhere behind me, a sleeve rustled. Someone inhaled sharply. The Emperor rose. I felt the shift in the air as he stepped down from the dais. Choose your next words carefully, he said. My sons, I repeated, forehead still to the floor, entered into a blood contract with a malignant spirit while investigating corruption in southern Providence. Gasps, low, quickly suppressed. They believed, I continued, forcing the steadiness back into my voice, that law alone was insufficient, and instead committed slaughter, the Emperor said. Yes. The word tasted like iron. Silence lengthened. Why tell me this? He asked. Because I am still their father. But I did not say that. Because I believe they remain inside those bodies, I answered. And if the entity is not severed soon, it will either consume them entirely or seek another host. The Emperor descended another step. I could feel his presence closer now. You served my father faithfully, he said. You served me faithfully. You ask for permission to attempt severance. Yes. If you fail, they die. My fingers pressed into the cold stone floor. Yes. If you succeed, they may still die. My breath faltered once, barely. Yes. And if word spreads that imperial officials can become beasts. He continued, voice sharpening. Confidence in the throne fractures. I lifted my head then, not high, just enough. It will not, I said quietly. If I must bear the shame alone, I will. The Emperor studied me for a long time. In that silence, I understood something I had not allowed myself to before. He was not only weighing policy, he was weighing whether I would break. I did not. But my hands were no longer steady against the floor. Finally, he spoke. One sealed order, he said. One night. No witnesses beyond those I name. I bowed fully, pressing my forehead down again. Your Majesty is merciful. I did not remember rising. The Taoist laid down 5 talismans around the pen, one to the east, one to the west, north, south, and one between them, directly before the larger tiger's chained body. His movements were calm, almost gentle, as if arranging cushions for a guest. He pricked his finger, a bead of blood welled up. It fell onto the final seal. Blood bound it, he said quietly. Blood, we'll call it. The air did not roar, it tightened. The kind of tightening that comes before a storm breaks a tree. The larger tiger's body stiffened, its claws scraped against stone, not in rage, in resistance. The smaller tiger made a sound, low in its throat. Not a growl, a protest. The Taoist began to chant. His voice was steady, measured, like reading law, like rewriting fate. The larger tiger roared, but halfway through, the sound split. as if something inside its chest had taken hold of the roar and bent it. A second voice layered over it, calm, almost courteous. "So," it said through the tiger's mouth, "the old man found help." My hands clenched without my permission. The guards did not move. The captain's face had gone grey. The Taoist did not falter. "I offered strength," the voice continued. "They accepted." The tiger's jaw stretched too wide. Its spine arched backward, vertebrae cracking audibly. The smaller tiger began thrashing, not outward, inward, as if fighting itself. "I gave them justice," the voice said mildly. "They asked for power." I stepped forward before I realized I had moved. "You fed on their faith," I said. The tiger's head turned toward me. Its eyes were bright, too awake. "They surrendered it," the voice replied gently. "For righteousness." The word struck like mockery. The Taoist lifted his palm. The crack of his strike split the air. The talismans ignited in blue flame. And then they screamed. Not roars, screams. Like human. Raw. Ripped out of throats that could no longer form language. My knees weakened. The larger tiger convulsed violently. Chains rattled. Iron bit deeper into flesh. Dark smoke seeped from its eyes, from its mouth, from the wound in its shoulder. The smaller tiger began slamming its own head against the stone. Again, again, as if it would rather shatter bone than remain divided. "Mingwen!" I shouted. The name tore from me before I could restrain it. The larger tiger's eye rolled toward my voice for one breath. One unbearable breath. Recognition returned. The Taoist's chant sharpened. "Return what is not yours." The smoke tore upward like a living thing being dragged by hooks. The larger tiger clawed at the ground, not to attack, to stay. The voice laughed, but this time there was strain in it. This time there was fury. The smoke twisted in midair, condensed. For a blink it shaped itself into the silhouette of a tall, robed scholar, refined, composed. If one did not look at the eyes, the Taoist thrust his sword through it. The form shattered with a sound like splitting bamboo. The smoke imploded into the central talisman. The blue flame flared, then went out. Silence fell. Not relief. It is like a room after something precious has been broken. The chains stopped rattling. The tigers lay still, breathing, barely. And I stood there, listening, waiting to see whether the next sound would be my sons' voices, or nothing at all. The fur began to recede, slowly, painfully, bones folding inward, limbs shrinking, until two broken young men lay in the circle of ash. Their bodies were covered in bruises and gashes. The sound is unbearable, not because of its violence, but because I know those bones. I remember when they were small enough to fit inside my palm. Mingwen coughed first, then Ming Yuan. I dropped to my knees beside them before anyone can stop me. Ming Yuan, I whispered, trying to not let my pain through my voice. His eyelids tremble. Slowly, he looks at me. And I see it. He knows. He knows he is dying. I press my forehead against his. His skin is warm, but the warmth is thinning like sunlight disappearing behind clouds. I feel it fading in pulses, each pulse weaker than the last. It feels as if something inside my chest is being pried loose, piece by piece, and dropped into emptiness. Father, he breathed. The word broke something inside me. I am here, I said. Mingwen turned toward us. His voice was faint. It's gone, he whispered. The Taoist did not speak. He already knew. Ming Yuan swallowed. There isn't much time. I shook my head. There is. He gave the smallest smile. There wasn't. In the Southern Flood Office, he said slowly, beneath the third ledger shelf. He coughed blood. Stone tile. Loose. I leaned closer. There are copies, he continued. Names. Grain records. Private seals. They were all connected. To whom? I demanded. He forced air into his lungs. Minister Chow, Inspector Han, Zhao. The names struck like hammer blows. The temple, he whispered. They funded it. Mingwen reached across weakly and caught my sleeve. You were never meant to carry this alone, I whisper, though my voice breaks halfway through the sentence. I try to steady it. I try to sound like a father, not a man, unraveling. His eyes search my face. There is no fear in them, only guilt. Guilt that he cannot protect us anymore. Guilt that he cannot remain my son. His lips move. I thought. His voice scrapes against his throat. If I endured it, it would end with me. His breath falters. He closes his eyes once, opens them again. I am sorry, he says, for leaving. My throat tightens so sharply I cannot speak. I swallow and force air into my lungs. Pain flared in my chest. No, I said sharply. He blinked, and for the first time since he was a boy, he looked uncertain. You were my son before anything else. His breathing steadies once, then slows, then catches again. Shallow, irregular. His fingers tighten in my sleeve. For a moment, I think he will hold on. For a moment, I believe it. Then the strength leaves his hand. His head grows heavier against my arm. Ming Yuan, I whisper. His chest does not rise again. Mingwen exhaled a broken sound. Brother, he whispered, drags himself, leaving a thin smear of blood behind him. His body shakes, not from pain now, but from something deeper, something final. He presses his forehead against his brother's shoulder. His strength is already draining from him. I pull him close. His face is pale. Too pale. His eyes meet mine. There is fear there now. Not fear of death, fear of leaving me alone. Father, he whispers. I brush the blood from his cheek with trembling fingers. I am here, I say, though my voice shakes openly now. There is no dignity left to preserve. Look at me. I am here. His eyes fill. Not tears exactly, something heavier. He tries to breathe deeper. His body refuses. I couldn't stop it, he says. I know. You do not need to explain, I tell him, but my voice cracks on the last word. You do not need to carry that. His gaze softens. Slowly, painfully slowly. The tension leaves his shoulders. His fingers loosen from my robe. His eyes remain on me until the very end. I watch hope fade first, then fear, then light. His head tilts slightly to the side, and stillness takes him. The Taoist stepped forward. It is finished, he said quietly, but it was not finished, because I was still breathing. The audience hall was quiet when I was summoned. Too quiet. Officials stood in 2 silent rows. No one met my eyes. Word had already spread. The beasts were dead. The beasts were my sons. The emperor did not look at me immediately. He remained seated, fingers resting lightly on the arm of the dragon throne. You requested permission, he said at last. You have used it. Yes, Your Majesty. His gaze lifted slowly. Were they truly your sons? The question was not accusation. It was something worse. It was disbelief. I knelt. They were. A murmur passed faintly through the hall. The emperor's jaw tightened. You concealed this? Yes. Why? I raised my head. Because until the ritual separated them, they were not in control of their own bodies. And when they were? He asked. My voice faltered for the first time. They apologized. The emperor looked away. For a moment, the hall felt smaller. He had known my sons since they were boys running through the palace courtyard during festivals. He had once praised Mingyuan's memorial drafts. He had laughed at Mingwen's sharp tongue during a debate. They served the Flood Commission faithfully, the emperor said quietly. Yes. And yet they became this. I did not answer, because the answer would implicate more than my sons. The emperor's gaze sharpened. Speak. So I did. They sought strength. For what? To correct what they believed could not be corrected through law alone. The hall stiffened. The emperor leaned forward slightly. And what could not be corrected? That was the moment. The last moment I could choose silence. Instead, I reached into my sleeve. My hand trembled, not from fear, from the weight of what it carried. I withdrew a sealed bundle of documents, bound in oilcloth and tied with thread. The cloth was stained faintly dark, not ink, blood. I placed it on the floor before the throne. The chief palace eunuch approached, took it carefully in both hands, and presented it to the emperor. My eldest son left these with me in his final breath. The emperor's eyes dropped to the bundle. What are they? Records of grain diversion, unauthorized levies, correspondence between provincial governors and 3 ministers currently standing in this hall. A ripple, sharper this time. One minister stepped forward, pale. Your Majesty, these accusations. Silence, the Emperor said. His voice was not loud, but it cut cleanly. I pressed my forehead to the stone floor. They believed the courts would bury it. They believed memorials would vanish. They believed justice required force. My throat tightened. They were wrong. That was the hardest sentence I have ever spoken. They were wrong, I repeated. The Emperor untied the thread. The first page unfolded. The hall did not breathe. His eyes moved slowly across the writing. Recognition flickered there. Then something colder. These are authentic seals, he said quietly. Yes. They collected this before. Yes. The Emperor's hand stilled. And they intended to present it? They intended to survive long enough to do so. The silence after that felt like mourning. The Emperor refolded the documents carefully. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. You have served this court for 3 reigns, he said. Yes. You assisted my father during the border famine. Yes. You advised me during my first few years. Yes. And now you kneel here, having lost both sons to what they believed was justice. My breath broke, just slightly, but I did not lift my head. The Emperor stepped closer. You could have destroyed this, he said. You could have spared your family's name. I swallowed. My family's name no longer belongs to me. The hall was utterly still. He stood above me for a long time. Then he said, the censorate will open a full investigation. The minister who had stepped forward earlier turned white. And as for you, the Emperor continued, you will take your household and leave the capital for retirement when this concludes. I bowed deeply. Thank you, Your Majesty. But as I rose, I heard him add, almost too quietly, they were not beasts when I knew them. My hands clenched inside my sleeves. No, I said. They were not. Later that night, alone in my study, I untied the bundle again. The oilcloth was stiff now. Ming Yuan's handwriting filled the margins. Small, precise, relentless. Beside certain names he had written short notes. Verified twice. Witness silenced. Village empty. There was no rage in the script, only determination. I ran my fingers over the ink. The strokes were steady, even near the end, even after the shrine, even after the transformation had begun. He had continued writing, continued gathering, continued believing that something lawful might still come of it, and Mingwen's additions, messier, hurried, tucked between pages. If he dies before presenting this, deliver to father. The paper trembled in my hands. He had known, he had prepared for his own death, and trusted me to finish what he could not. I closed the bundle slowly. This was not proof of corruption alone. It was proof that they had not abandoned the law. They had simply lost faith in its speed. When the investigation unfolded in the following weeks, arrests were made quietly. 3 ministers removed, 2 provincial governors detained. 1 councillor found dead in his chamber before the warrant reached him. The city whispered. But no one spoke of tigers anymore. They spoke of corruption and reform. The beasts had died. The evidence remained. The capital gates closed behind us at dawn. The carriage carried 3 generations of breath away from stone and iron. I sat at the front. Inside, my wife next to me kept one hand around our granddaughter's shoulders as the wheels struck uneven road. My daughter-in-law sat opposite them, back straight, fingers folded in her sleeves, gaze lowered but alert. No one spoke of the hall. The child spoke enough for all of us. "Grandmother," she asked, peering through the curtain, "why are the scarecrows wearing hats?" "So the birds will think they are men," my wife replied gently. "Are birds foolish?" "No," I answered. "They are hungry." She considered that deeply, then nodded, satisfied. The stone road softened to earth. The air shifted, less dust, more river wind. At midday we stopped so the horses could rest. Before I could step down, the child had already leapt from the carriage. "Slowly," her mother called, with that instinctive tightness that never leaves a widow. The girl ran into the field, arms spread, as if she could embrace the wind itself. The sunlight caught in her hair. For a breath, just one, the image blurred against memory. 2 boys once ran like that, arguing, shouting, falling and rising without hesitation. I did not close my eyes this time. I let the memory pass through me like wind through tall grass. My wife handed me her handkerchief. "Grandfather!" My granddaughter shouted with excitement, kneeling down. I walked toward her. She had found a thin green shoot forcing its way through cracked soil. "It's growing," she whispered. Her mother came to stand beside her. She knelt more slowly, brushing dust from the child's sleeve before studying the sprout. "It survived the frost," she said quietly. "It shouldn't," the child insisted. "The ground is hard." I crouched opposite them. The soil was dry, the earth split, and yet the green stem stood upright, fragile but stubborn. "It grows anyway," I said. The child cupped her small hands around it protectively. "Because it wants to." My wife approached then, standing just behind us. "Yes," my wife said softly, "because it wants to." The field rippled in waves as the wind passed. The child looked up at her mother. "Will it become a tree?" "Perhaps," her mother replied. "Then birds will sit on it." "And they will not be hungry." Her mother gently looked at her. The child beamed as if this were settled fact. I reached down and removed a small stone lodged near the sprout's base. The child watched as though I were performing something sacred. When I finished, she slipped her hand into mine. Her palm was warm, alive. Behind her, her mother rose slowly. There was a shadow beneath her eyes that had not been there a year ago. But she stood steady. My wife rested one hand briefly against her shoulder. No words, only comfort. "Come," my wife said at last. "The horses must not wait." The child took one last serious look at the sprout, as if entrusting it with something unspoken, and then ran back toward the carriage. We continued south, and the wind felt a bit lighter.